Welcome to Plant Science Day Celebration, a history. I'm Dr. Kirby Stafford, head of the Department of Entomology, the state entomologist, as well as the unofficial historian for the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. In this year 2020, we celebrate the 110th anniversary of Field Day, or Plant Science Day as we know it today, at Lockwood Farm. And so today I'm going to provide not only a history of our field days, but also a history of our 75-acre research farm in Hamden, Connecticut. Just to back up a little bit, the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station was the first in America, established in 1875 by the General Assembly. At our Huntington Street location in New Haven, which was purchased, that property was purchased in 1882, you can see some of the early station plantings here in 1910. Another very useful adjunct to the experiment station's work was the experimental field at Centerville Farm, which is now the location of Norwood Avenue at the intersection of Whitney and Washington Avenues in Hamden. There was experimental breeding work with corn and tobacco, testing of lime sulfur summer sprays on fruit trees, and the handling of a number of field crops was conducted at this farm. There was also plots used at various cooperating farms, such as the one in Spring Glen area of Hamden, which is now a shopping center. These sites were leased in 1908, 1909, and 1910, and easily reached from New Haven by trolley. And as from our records, on the 10th of August in 1910, a field meeting was held at the station to informally dedicate the new building named the Johnson Laboratory, at which more than 400 farmers and their wives were present. In the afternoon, this company went from the station to the Centerville Field and inspected and informally discussed the workday. It was intended to hold the summer meeting each year. And the photograph of that first field meeting held at the Centerville Farm is somewhat iconic. And here you can see people gathered next to the trolley tracks that you can see in the lower part of this image, where people arrived to attend that first field meeting in 1910. The experiment station bought then, in November of 1910, a farm of almost 20 acres at Mount Carmel for $6,000 from Annie McLaughlin, with monies provided by the Lockwood Trust that was established in 1896. This was not far from the city, and it included a small house for the caretaker. It had an orchard, and they set out an orchard of apples and peaches for experimental work. And they began doing experiments on the effect of the crop and on the soil of fertilizers and manures, and as well as other handling of an old and neglected orchard. This site had not been cultivated for many years, and if you'll note in our records, West End was overgrown with bobbin birch, sumac, sweet fern, and blackberry vines. The Centerville Field was given up in the spring of 1912. To look at it from a modern perspective here, from an aerial view, you'll see on the top arrow the Mount Carmel Farm location that was purchased in 1910. There was a field day in 1913, which was only a 20-minute trolley trip from New Haven. The new trolley was extended up what is currently Whitney Avenue from New Haven to Centerville, and then expanded to Mount Carmel in 1903. And then the bottom arrow shows you the approximate location of the original Centerville Farm for the first field day in 1910 that was given up in 1910. Of course, today it's now a residential area. Now there's a large boulder on our farm that is called a glacial erratic that was deposited by the glacier from its original location, and it provides a lovely view of the Sleeping Giant State Park from the farm. We acknowledge that the land on which the farm currently lies is the territory of the Quinnipiac people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations before European colonists arrived. The Native Americans called the sleeping giant Hobomok. But it was almost a century after the founding of New Haven Colony before Europeans began to settle the area, which is today called Mount Carmel in Hamden. In this map of our Lockwood Farm, you'll see noted outlined in blue the original 19.25 acres that were purchased in 1910, right along Kenwood Avenue and Evergreen Avenue. Then in 1914, a barn was built on the site at the site of a ruined barn at a cost of just a little over $1,500. And a second field meeting was held at the Mount Carmel Farm in August with an attendance of about 250 people. Then subsequently in 1915, an additional 16 acres was purchased along with another 4 acres adjacent to the original property in 1928. Here's a picture of our field day in 1924. I just love the image of the old cars and people gathered around the tent that was erected there at the time. Here's a picture of people gathered for the talk under the tent here in 1924. However, there was no field day in 1925. Our Board of Control voted to admit the usual field day because an exhibit was to be sent to the Charter Oak Fair and because of the station's celebration of its 50th anniversary held on October 12th of that year. The Lockwood Farm is also the location of the discovery of hybrid corn. Dr. Donald F. Jones was hired in 1915. And against genetic dogma, he conducted trials crossing 2 crosses of corn. And he found that this double cross increased yield substantially. And he published this method in 1919. And here you can see him standing in a cornfield on our field day in August 18th of 1931. Just to show you how the program looked back in 1940, here you can see a copy in green as well as a copy of the program. While the station farm and laboratories are open to visitors throughout the year, this day is a special at home to all citizens of the state. We extend to you a most cordial welcome, as written by Dr. Slate, the director of the station in 1940. And here's a picture of the field day in 1940 with a large tent located next to the barns that lie along Kenwood Avenue. And visitors at a plot set up in 1940. There was no field day during the war years of 1942 to 1944, when 16 staff were serving in the armed forces. After 3 years without a field day, attendance exceeded 1,000 people in 1945 and again in 1946. No mention is made of field day in 1950 with a celebration of the station's 75th anniversary in New Haven in September. There are a few other years when it appears that field day may not have been held, but at least it is not mentioned in our regular annual report. Here is a picture of our field day in 1946. And then in 1948, an additional 14.5 acres were purchased, followed by another 3.5 acres in 1943. Then, and here's some pictures from our field day in 1949 with people gathered underneath the tent and people looking at displays around the farm, as well as coffee being serviced to guests. Then in 1985, an additional 16.7 acres was purchased. And then in 1948 and 1953, the upper barns were built. And as you can see in this view from July of 1961. And so by 1993, the farm began taking on its more modern appearance that you can see here. It is a beautiful location. Then in 1988, you can see that the presentations of the tent continue using posters. We had walking tours, as you can see, that people could sign up for at their regular times outside our barns. where the barn exhibits were located. And again, you can see people gathered underneath the tent for those short talks. The Bird and Butterfly Garden began in the fall of 1996 with a partnership between the Experiment Station and the Federated Garden Clubs of Connecticut, and it is a beautiful location that is enjoyed to this day. And then in 1997, the Board of Control purchased 2 acres, which also had a cottage on it. And this brought the Experiment Station property up to its approximately 75 acres today. The 1920s cottage and the 2 acres that were purchased next to the farm was extensively, in 1997, was extensively renovated. And you can see the original cottage with its screen porch in the upper right-hand corner. Other additions to our field day or plant science day were technical demonstrations, bus tours instead of tractor pulls. An old secretary building was demolished in 2001 and replaced with a more modern facility. An ebb and flow greenhouse was built in 2006. And then a children's passport for kids program was started in 2005 that continues to this day. And the Kids Corner was established, and we started seeing the active participation of Girl Scouts. Our idea was to increase the activities and show our agricultural research to the kids as well. We began adding tables for the participation of outside groups in 2002, and here you can see a picture from 2008 as some of these association groups, what I'll loosely term the avenue located adjacent to the large tent where talks were held at that time. The Tick Tent, which was established in 1997, became the public health tent with information and displays on ticks, mosquitoes, and other relevant subjects. Here you can see some images of people gathered underneath the tent for the talks. You can see one of the displays in our barn exhibits inside the barn. And you can see people gathered outside and having a really nice time on a beautiful summer day, as well as taking tours of the plots around the farm back in 2007 and 2008. Now, 5 governors have actually made an appearance to speak or make remarks at Lockwood Farm on Plant Science Day. Governor Daniel Malloy came in 2014. Governor Lo Weicker in 1991. Governor Ella Grasso in 1975. Governor John Dempsey in 1960. And Governor Wilbur Cross in 1931 and 1934. A pavilion was constructed in 2015 to replace the large tent used for presentations. And this pavilion was first used for Plant Science Day in 2016. As you can see, people gathered here for one of the presentations. It is a lovely facility, and it was constructed completely with Connecticut hardwoods. And so today we have our presentations here in the pavilion on a much larger screen along with some monitors that makes the talks much more readily available to attendees under the pavilion. Now a little bit of Mount Carmel Field Day trivia. As I pointed out, there was no field day in 1950 during the war years from 1942 to 1944, and possibly a few other years. The only Saturday field day was held in 1958. The Mount Carmel Field Day was first called Lockwood Farm Field Day in 1960, and for 8 years after that, it was called Science at Work Day. It was first called Plant Science Day in 1969. Average attendance from 1960 to 2018 was about 993. There were 973 attendees in 2019. And attendance exceeded 1,500 on 3 occasions. And this was in 1934 with Governor Gross, in 1961 with Governor Dempsey, and in 2002 when Roger B. Swain of Victory Garden fame delivered the Samuel W. Johnson Memorial Lecture. So to summarize some of the improvements and changes over time, we established a bird and butterfly garden. We switched from posters to PowerPoint presentations for the short talks with a larger screen, along with an air-conditioned bus tours. We improved our registration site and a new sound system. The main tent was replaced with a lovely pavilion. We established technical demonstration tent talks. A new cottage was built, or renovated, I should say. We increased the involvement of children through our passport program and the active participation of the Girl Scouts. And then we increased the participation of outside exhibitors to provide more diversity for people and things to do when they attend our Plant Science Day. So although we had to go with a virtual Plant Science Day this year in 2020 due to COVID-19, we look forward to welcoming you back to Lockwood Farm and Plant Science Day in 2021. It is truly a beautiful day to see all the research activities of the experiment station and enjoy a lovely sight overlooking Sleeping Giant. Thank you. And again, my name is Kirby Stafford, and my contact information, phone number, and email address, as well as Experiment Station's website, is provided here on this slide. If you do have any questions about the history of Plant Science Day in Lockwood Farm, there will be a Q&A live from 2 o'clock to 2:30 here on our Plant Science Day. Thank you.